have a very extrovert stage act by any standards. Will you be able to go on with...
You mean I flaunt it?
You're over the top.
Each song that we do has a different sort of meaning to it. So, I mean, you know, it is rock and roll as a sort of label, from the 1920s vaudeville to the heavy, the real sort of raw rock and roll, to the ballad, to, you know.
People want to know about Freddie above all. No one's asking me questions about Roger O'Brien's private life.
And I think as time went on, the stage persona really took over from the original individual, and he lived this larger-than-life character.
He would be thrilled to know that I've been asked to talk about him years after his death.
The manager of the group Queen, Jim Beach, decided it would be a good idea to do a photo collection of my brother, but naturally he only had all the pictures from when he was famous. So he approached my mom to see that if she'd got any old photographs, if she would like to help out in this. And naturally my mom loved the idea and started delving into the old photographs.
I've always been intrigued by show business artists who become their own image. Very few people who were Freddie Mercury fans know he was Farrokh Bulsara. And indeed, if you bear in mind that I got to know him in 1974, I never heard anybody call him Farrokh. It's rather like Elton John. You didn't call him Reg. Once he decided he wanted to be Elton, you called him Reg at your peril. And Farrokh wanted to be called Freddie. Within music, everyone was calling him Freddie.
By the time I met him, he was definitely Freddie. And in fact, it was some time before I realised that what his original name was, because he still had a passport in his birth name. But he lived his character. He was Freddie Mercury, and that was all he wanted to be.
His parents had come from India. They'd only gone to Zanzibar so that his father could continue his job with the British government. And when Zanzibar won its independence, they then moved to England. They were Zoroastrians, and I know that to many Zoroastrians, it is a matter of great pride that Freddie Mercury is their great rock star.
I was at a place called the Chateau d'Hérouville, which was just outside Paris, and Bowie was recording pin-ups. And his co-producer and engineer was a guy called Ken Scott, and he was affiliated with a company called Trident Audio Productions, who had Trident Studios in the middle of London, Soho, where they recorded Transformer, Ziggy Stardust, All the Young Dudes, a whole bunch of slew of stuff around that time. Anyway, they had a studio, but as a sidebar, they had a production company, and they signed a few acts to the production company. And during that visit, Freddie mentioned to me that they were interested in working with me. This would have been, I suppose, like August, September of '73. And for whatever, you know, I was like, in my own modest way, a hot photographic commodity for what that was worth back then, which was a lot less than it is now, because of the glam thing, and especially because of David, Lou and Iggy and my connection there. So they were big fans, and especially Freddie. I think Freddie was, well, he was always the driving force behind the visual aspects of Queen.
Freddie, being interested in music from an early age, would have known that there had never been a pop star called Farrokh. When you think that Freddie persuaded Brian and Roger to rename Smile Queen, taking it up a level of both audaciousness and status. So similarly, changing your name from Balsara to Mercury, well, you're choosing the name of one of the gods. So you are elevating yourself in terms of your image, at least. And this is an amazing case of personal reinvention, but it worked.
We were told that there was a really good band playing at Imperial College, and I went along with some of my friends from EMI and one or two other people, not really knowing what to expect. This would have been November 1973. And I was absolutely blown away. I don't think I've ever seen a new band play like that. The place was absolutely packed.
You can see it's this microscopic stage, and Freddie is performing like he's already in a stadium. I mean, he's big, he projected big.
In the early days, there was a tradition that they always wore black and white on stage. And Freddie would be incredibly careful that everything matched, everything fitted. He would have black and white painted fingernails. And he loved what was always referred to as Freddie's frocks. And he would come out and the most amazing things. Zandra Rhodes designed some for him in the early days. One with wings that looked like an angel. And it was a long time before they changed that. For a very long time, it was always black and white. The others weren't quite as flamboyant, but that was their theme.
In those days, you didn't necessarily have great expectations of the first album, and quite often, if you had a hit, it kind of skewed the process. We released Keep Yourself Alive off the first album, and the album went okay, and by, I guess, 3 or 4 months into it, we'd made a modest impact, because by that time, the Imperial College gig had happened, and the first press started, and it was just a little whisper building.
Well, Roger was, in a way, the most obvious rock star material. I mean, the girls loved him, this cute little blonde fellow. And Brian was more cerebral, but looked terrific, and he's still got that incredible mop of hair. Freddie, of course, was the flavor of the time because he was Mr. Androgyny. His bisexuality was pretty much acknowledged, but that was very fashionable at the time. I mean, David had made sure that androgyny and bisexuality were extremely fashionable, so even all kinds of people that weren't the least bit gay would be running around acting like they were gay because you actually got the hottest babes that way.
Anyone looking back at the early years of Queen have to understand the context of the time. Being in a group was like participating in the social network of that time. This is before the internet, so there were none of the social networks. And the way that young people related to each other and communicated was through music. And you expressed your views through the type of music you liked, through the earnest and excited communications you had with your friends about the latest records. The DJs on the radio were the human incarnations of Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. And the music had a role in society.
Queen and Freddie's writing in particular was very different from other people in that he could explore so many different avenues. The fact that he could, relatively early in his career, write something like Killer Queen, which is actually really an unusual record. It didn't fit what was going on at the time. You couldn't put it alongside, other comparable bands like Roxy Music or whatever and say, well, that's kind of that sort of thing. It was just a unique record.
She keeps a Moet Chandon in a pretty cabinet. Let them eat cake, she says, just like Marie Antoinette. Building a remedy for Khrushchev and Kennedy at any time. She's a killer queen, gunpowder gelatine, dynamite with a laser beam, guaranteed to blow your mind.
They wanted a black and white theme, they wanted a gatefold, and they wanted to feature the band. So that was my brief. I was working with Mott the Hoople at the time. David had put them on the map with All the Young Dudes, the song he wrote and the production of it. And Queen got some gigs supporting them. I photographed both bands performing live. And afterwards I sat with Freddie and I showed him this picture of Marlene Dietrich and suggested that that should be the approach for the black shot of the band. And he loved it. I mean, whether it was the shot or whether it was the fact that it was Marlene and Dietrich, I shall be Marlene, you know. I mean, he immediately responded. He corralled the rest of the band and they went along with it. There was the black shot and then there was the white shot. I did both setups and I had to light them very carefully because I wanted to make it a little bit more dramatic than the Marlene and Dietrich shot. So I wanted to hood the eyes so that the shadow really encompassed the eyes, and I had to get them, all four of them, arranged in the correct way so I could do this. And I was up and down on a ladder and they were buzzing up and down in the makeup. I mean, they were very, like, you know, wanted to look fabulous. And of course I wanted them to look fabulous too. And I actually did a lot of shots and afterwards we reviewed them. And for quite a while, the rest of the band were a little bit, they thought maybe that word pretentious was sticking in their head. And they weren't sure that the black shot was the right shot. I think because it was a very powerful image. Obviously it was. And of course they duplicated it 2 or 3 years later for the Bohemian Rhapsody video.
Is this the real life?
When we got Bohemian Rhapsody, we were concerned.
Is this just fantasy?
Everyone was in shock.
Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality.
It was crazy.
Open your eyes, look up to the skies and see.
What on earth do they think they're doing? It's so long. It's 3 records in one.
And they'd never heard anything like it.
I'm just a poor boy.
You can't call it just a song. You can't call it something as grand as an opera. It's a piece. It's a mini opera.
I was the idiot who said, why don't we ask them to do an edit? And the response was a couple of words. And of course, the rest is history.
Mama just killed a man, put a gun against his head, pulled my trigger, now he's dead. Mama.
I don't think there was ever a disagreement because nobody ever asked our opinion and didn't need to.
He said to me, "Oh, we made a short film yesterday afternoon with Bruce Gowers." And of course, the reason they'd made it was because they couldn't do it on Top of the Pops, because they couldn't do that many overdubs, they couldn't do the segues of styles and so forth. So, but to be on Top of the Pops, they wanted to give them this clip, so they made a short film. Well, that short film happened to revolutionize the way that music is consumed, because neither MTV or VH1 would exist had it not been for that short film.
The whole thing was quite extraordinary. And again, I think people weren't quite sure how to take it, but once they saw it, they realised just how good it was.
The point about Freddie was that he was, you know, he obviously had some strand of eccentricity about his lyric writing and his some very left field things. I mean, the music itself was so bizarre that you had no idea what the lyrics meant, and really, who cared?
I think one of the interesting things about Queen is that their songs are open to such interpretation, but I'm not going to say on camera who I think it's about.
With Bohemian Rhapsody, it was basically I was writing 3 songs, and they were meant to be different, and I just couldn't finish them, and I just thought, oh, damn it, I just put the 3 together. we just about do all our own production. We have Roy Baker, who sort of co-produces with us. And all the 4 albums have been a co-production with him.
Do you feel that Night at the Opera is perhaps you've reached a climax at a certain stage in your career? Because I believe it's definitely the best that you've ever done.
Thanks. I think it's possibly the peak so far because it's the most successful. But I mean, we hope we're going to get better.
It is going to be difficult, especially with Bohemian Rhapsody being as large.
Well, a kid wrote me a letter about that and said, I study demonology and satanic things. Why do they use Beelzebub? And I suppose that's a legitimate question.
Why do we use it?
Yeah.
It's just why do we use anything? I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean I study demonology and things. I just love the word Beelzebub. It's a great word, isn't it?
Very camp word when you look at it. Actually, the letter was signed with a cloven hoof at the top. What is that?
The same sect. I belong to that.
Are you sticking pins in effigies?
The next single that's coming off Night at the Opera is You're My Best Friend, I Understand. And already we're getting a lot of requests for that. But it's entirely different in structure to Bohemian Rhapsody, and that's what makes the album attractive to me. Is it
This
right?
is John's song.
Yeah.
John Rudd.
Yes, because I mean that's probably one thing in the group that we all do right, which lends to the variety of our albums. You know, it's a very good thing, I think.
There have been several songs on your albums that have been involved with death and all this sort of stuff. Is that just an accidental thing, or?
That's Freddie's morbid mind, then.
One of my docile moods, actually.
I think they had this amazing sensibility and curiosity, and it was something about the chemistry between them. They were very energetic. They were very curious people. They were very intelligent. I think, to give due respect, they were very bright, and they fed off their success. That only made them, like a band like the Beatles, they didn't want to stay stuck anywhere.
The main problem Queen had with the press is that they were immediate descendants of the Beatles. Because when the Beatles stopped in 1970, Queen make their chart debut only 3 years after. So they wouldn't be taken as revolutionary artists because they weren't. So it seemed. They were working in the same format as someone who had already been the definitive artist of popular music.
To some extent, it's no publicity is bad publicity. If there's controversy, then you've got profile. You can build on that. You can make a plus out of that because it's a talking point. And I think over the years that was always the case with Queen until they reached the national treasure status.
In the early days of popular music, the 2 greatest stars were Enrico Caruso and Al Jolson. And that is because both of them could be heard in every corner of the theater without amplification, because they were working before amplification.
Don't cry, Freddie, don't cry. Goodbye, Freddie, I gotta buy.
Freddie's voice can be heard.
He would walk out on stage and he could control the audience immediately. There was something about him. And of course, especially a little while later, a lot of their songs were anthems in a way. I don't think I ever met anybody who came out of a Queen concert disappointed. Now, perhaps I'm biased because I suppose in a way I became a fan. I tried to be objective, it's kind of hard. I think that they just wanted to do the best they possibly could for as much of the time as they possibly could, and I think they achieved that. I think Freddie was a very affectionate person. He was a very kind person. He would always come round, make sure people were okay. He just liked people. And if you were a friend or family of Freddie's, then he was wonderful. And I think he felt like, I genuinely think he felt like that about his fans. He was talking directly to them, and I think that they felt that, and I think that's why he had such amazing control over the audience. Even if it was just for those few moments, he absolutely loved them, and I think it was mutual.
And when asked to think of a verb to describe Freddie on stage, I think of strut, like a peacock, or some beautiful, rare creature, just strutting across the stage, not afraid to dominate.
The way he had that unique mic thing with the bit hanging down, but not on a stand. He moved about the whole time, and that gave him the freedom. I don't recall him ever standing there. He used that mic, that mobile mic. He was a great instinctive performer who loved to be in front of an audience.
He has very good enunciation, so everyone can understand what he is saying, and you can hear it a long way away. Well, this turned out to be immensely useful when Queen would do stadium gigs or beach gigs or outdoor gigs where they had tens of thousands or even over 100,000 people.
There are very few people whose voices are immediately recognisable, and I think Freddie is one of them. Freddie had the most incredible voice. He had a wonderful range, he had a depth, he had a richness and a power in it, I think, that meant that the songs they'd written, some of them I don't think anybody else could have sung. And I find it very interesting that there have been very few cover versions of Queen songs, and I suspect they frighten people because it would be very hard to copy what Freddie did.
Several of the great singers of all time consciously used their voices as an instrument. Frank Sinatra, for example, learned to use his voice from listening to Tommy Dorsey, who was the leader of the band that he was in 1940.
I long to kiss you, but I would not dare. I'm so afraid that you may vanish.
And he noticed that Dorsey, a trombone player, had great breath control, which enabled him to draw out long notes. And he wanted to draw out long notes in singing, so he learned breath control. And Freddie could do the same thing because he realized his voice was like an instrument.
If you are but a dream.
Freddie was extremely interested in people who had power. Liza Minnelli was an obvious influence. Her style of belting, he loved a belter. The ultimate, of course, was Montserrat Caballé. I went to the Covent Garden Opera House to see a recital by Montserrat Caballé, the great Spanish diva. And I looked to my left, and not far away, there's Freddie in a box seat. And he's going, and he's so excited. He's like a schoolboy. He's thrilled to be in the presence of this woman whose voice he loved. Well, it was no surprise to me at all that he shortly thereafter recorded with her, because he was into it.
Let the songs begin. Let the music play.
He loved the way that this woman, who did not look glamorous, could become a glamorous character strictly through the use of her voice and her attitude. This was Freddie par excellence. Freddie at Live Aid is probably the best domination of an audience I've ever seen.
Everyone was looking around saying, well, they've done it, haven't they? You know, it was extraordinary.
They're stealing the show. All the artists backstage, who had, of course, their own egos, their own sense of pride, they're stealing the show. And they were.
Shivers down my spine, body's aching all the time.
And you hear the audience going completely nuts. And you see on the monitor Freddie doing this impromptu duet with a BBC cameraman.
Every night, every day, a little piece of you is falling away. Lift your face, the western waving.
And everybody said they stole the show. It just proved that they were undoubtedly one of the best live bands there's ever been.
Queen really did rule the world for a short period.
The media get excited about all kinds of things. I mean, you can argue it's none of their bloody business, but they're going to make it their business anyway. So what are you going to do about it?
Freddie, and indeed the band generally, were very single-minded and also didn't necessarily suffer fools gladly. The band, and Freddie in particular, his very flamboyance, if you like, invited negative comments from people who liked their rock and roll to be more down and dirty.
Freddie was as nice a person as you'll find. Extremely generous to his friends, threw great parties, and consumed too much of life. He took to the gay scene in New York in the late 70s like David Attenborough would take to a nature film, to forms of wildlife.
When I first went to Freddie's home, he was living in a flat in the Kensington area with his girlfriend, Mary Austin, and he was still the best of friends with her to the day he died. Even as she and Freddie grew apart in some ways, they became the very best of friends. And she married, she had children. But their relationship never really changed. He just had other relationships as well.
Freddie, over the years, got more remote, changing lifestyle, really. When you first knew him, he was actually personally quite a private person. He was quite shy. I don't think necessarily really comfortable with new people and strangers. But his other side was the flamboyant stage presence. And I think as time went on, the stage persona really took over from the original individual, and he lived this larger-than-life character all the time. So I think by the early 80s, and especially when they were spending so much time abroad, his whole approach to life changed.
It was fairly obvious that there was this tension that was unresolved in him, and even in the end, because Mary came back at the end and looked after him. I mean, where he talks about Mary as being the one person in his life that he truly trusted. And I've seen her on film talking about him having, when he came out of the closet and first spoke to her about it. Obviously, there was a battle going on inside of him, but that was when he came out of the closet. But I have pictures of the guy that he was hanging around already with someone he was having a relationship with before he finally told Mary. So he was hanging around in '74, this particular guy. He certainly didn't want to talk about it publicly, any of that. He would discuss things privately. And I could name a couple of interesting names, but I won't, that I happen to know he had relationships with, but that's not for me to discuss. That's, I do believe, even for public figures, that there is You know, there's an area of privacy that I may be privileged to have certain knowledge, but if they want to talk about it, it's up to them. But so I don't want people talking about all the lurid things in my youth either. It's none of their fucking business. Not that people are as interested. They are cases like Lou or David or Freddie.
I think perhaps Freddie was always looking for love, which he found in many ways over his life. I think he was always looking for perfection, which is probably a harder thing to find. And I think he was ultimately curious. He wanted to know what was out there, to experience a lot. And he found a lot of the things he was looking for, but perhaps not all of them.
There was Don't Stop Me Now, which has become a very, very popular song in Britain. And of course, to this day, Brian feels a bit uncomfortable about it because it's a celebration of Freddie's hedonistic lifestyle, which was to kill him. I've said this several times before, but it's just a key moment in my life with Freddie and as a gay person. In Heaven, the nightclub, in early 1983, I had returned from the United States, and I said, have you adjusted your behavior in light of the new disease? Because it had no name then. And he said with one of his flourishes, he said, darling, my attitude is, fuck it. I'm doing everything with everybody. And I had that sinking feeling. There literally is a sinking feeling. I've had it twice in my life, and that was once. And I just felt at that moment, we're going to lose Fred. And I also thought that even though he's putting up this great front, probably in the back of his mind, he thinks it's too late. What was tremendously unfair to the first wave of people who died from HIV/AIDS was that they became infected when it was not known that the virus existed. So they couldn't know that what they were doing was unsafe. They didn't know there was any risk. It's very easy for people to look back on a previous era with the mores and morals of today. But we have to remember that the 70s was this incredible era of sexual expression. There was about a quarter of a century where everything was, if not safe, at least treatable. Because once you had penicillin knock syphilis on the head in the 1940s, there was no sexually transmitted disease that was going to kill you. So in the 70s, particularly with the emancipation movements, the women's liberation and the gay liberation, people were having sex like there was no tomorrow. It's easy to forget that today. And then, of course, millions paid. Now, I know that Freddie did not have a test until the late 80s and did not demonstrate symptoms until the second half of the 80s. But remember, there was a 10-year incubation period, on average, between infection and symptoms. So if you were to say Freddie starts showing symptoms late 80s, if he were an average case, no guarantee that he was, but if he were an average case, he would have been infected late 70s, which makes sense with his lifestyle enthusiasms as he'd conveyed them to me. And that is so cosmically, though in no way uniquely, unfair. That sexual experimentation should become a capital matter. No one thought that was possible.
By that time, he was being pursued everywhere by paparazzi, and the tabloids were speculating on a weekly basis, every time he was seen in public. So it was that time when there were a lot of similar casualties in and around the music business, and most of us knew somebody who was similarly afflicted. So you kind of had the feeling what was going on. He wasn't right. The fact that their activities had been so much scaled back by them made it clear that there was something wrong. Regardless of what it was or what caused it, he was obviously not the same Freddie.
I think most people knew that he was ill. I think nobody really knew what was wrong or how long he'd been ill or how bad it was until pretty much at the end.
Freddie was one of those persons with AIDS who responded by not wishing to be seen.
It would be wrong of us not to say that he has been depicted in certain quarters as a sort of decadent, wild, bisexual, irresponsible lover.
Yeah.
So what was actually the truth of that?
Yes, that definitely makes us very angry, because he was, certainly the Freddie we knew, wasn't wildly promiscuous. He wasn't consumed by drugs, any of these things that people are saying. He had a very responsible attitude to everyone that he was close to, and he was a very generous and caring person to all of the people that came through his life. And more than that, you can't ask, really. As he moved from a relationship to another one, he was always very, as I say, aware of the effect he was having on people's lives.
We all knew that there were many people. My PA died, for heaven's sake. I mean, it was in our homes, it was in our friendly circles. And it was happening with such suddenness and force that you couldn't mourn everybody as deeply as they deserved at the moment they were dying. In retrospect, whenever you think of one of these people, then you experience their passing uniquely and individually. But then, because there were so many involved, you were just trying to keep your head above water and be good to everybody.
One of the extraordinary things about Queen and Freddie was that they had an instinctive commercial and marketing nous. With Queen, and I think with Freddie's writing, it was staggering how year on year, at that time when we in the record company were expecting and waiting for the new album, knowing that the crucial thing was, is there going to be a natural big hit? That year on year, they came up with the most extraordinary, always another step into the unexpected, something incredibly serendipitous. One year it was Killer Queen, the following year, of course, was Bohemian Rhapsody. Then it was Somebody to Love the following year. Then it was We Are the Champions. And if you think about those records, which were some of the great anthems of rock, every year we would breathe the sigh of relief and say, "Oh, got another one."
Now, for the band, it would have been very difficult, and I give them full points. Knowing that something was up that was completely outside their own circle. Because unlike the theatrical community or the gay community, the heterosexual members of Queen wouldn't know as much about it. They would just know, oh, he's not looking too good. What's up? What's happening? But because they were very much a quartet, they stood by him to the very, very end. And the very, very end, of course, is that incredibly moving video.
I find I still love you. I still love you.
Well, the one thing he wanted to do was keep on working in the studio. He was absolutely determined to keep the group going and to keep working, and that actually kept him going.
You see, we
for a
watched
long
earlier.
time.
We watched earlier Those Are the Days of Our Lives, and actually watching it was unbearably poignant just to watch it. So for you fellas to be in that, it must have been a difficult session emotionally.
It's incredibly difficult.
Yes, it was hard. It was really, but we were sort of trying to support him through it. And I mean, he was incredibly brave at that time. Obviously, he knew, you know, and we all knew at that time. But you know, the best thing is just to get on with life and to do it. And he did that. And I think he carried on very bravely, actually.
They put out that video, and there he is, and you go, that's not Freddie. That's a spec. Although he could still sing, you know, however sick he was, he could. It was like seeing that disgusting-looking, blubbery Elvis. I've seen footage of his last concert, and he looks horrible, but he sounds divine still, you know. So talent is a funny thing. It doesn't. Disease doesn't necessarily kill the talent, or, you know, self-destructive behaviour, and. Clearly his talent was intact right up until that last recording.
The singles from Innuendo are literal. The Innuendo single, which is about being written about in the press, well, of course, they were speculating about him in the press. I'm Going Slightly Mad, a direct reference to having moments of disease. And The Show Must Go On, which was his philosophy.
Well, it was a sad thing. I mean, how could it not be? He was a very sweet guy who died, and I know he was in because Mary told me that he was in a lot of pain at the end. It was not an easy death for Freddie. But apparently he didn't complain. Apparently he was not, and he didn't feel sorry for himself. I don't know what else he could have done, because he, you know, but apparently he was in a lot of pain.
When Freddie died, that was the end of Queen.
There was just great sadness. You felt that, like all the artists that die young, you say, well, what would have been? You know, what would Buddy Holly have done? You know, what would Eddie Cochran have done? You think, well, what would Freddie be doing now?
The glamour of the world's rock stars in a very unglamorous setting. Rehearsal studios west of London, where the final polish is being put on tomorrow's show. Casual dress was very much the order of the day, Elton John also sporting a brand new hair look for the big event. A succession of stars arrived throughout the day to practice alongside the surviving members of Queen. For many, it's a poignant occasion. Wembley Stadium was the scene of one of Queen's greatest performances back in 1986. Today, a team of 400 technicians, including Freddie Mercury's original road crew, were back in action preparing the giant stage. But the organisers here hope that the message will reach more than 500 million people in more than 70 countries. And despite all the glamour and razzmatazz, it will be a serious message trying to promote AIDS education on a truly global scale.
He would love it. He would be thrilled. He would be thrilled to know that I've been asked to talk about him years after his death. He would be so excited. And in a conspiratorial way, he would say, oh, I love this. You know, he'd have that little shoulder thing. I once said to him, when I Want to Break Free was new, there was a point where Freddy, who was in drag doing the vacuuming, went from one room to the next. And as he crossed the wall in the set, he did a little double time so that there was the minimum time spent out of vision. It was a very professional thing to do. So that he was almost entirely in camera. And I said to him, you know, my favorite part of I Want to Break Free is when you go into double time between the rooms. And he said, oh, I'm so glad you noticed that. It's my favorite part. You see, he was thrilled to be a professional. Being Freddie Mercury allowed him to be the professional and the legend that he wanted to be. I could say, I would love to be Artur Rubinstein, the great concert pianist. Well, although I have a piano, I'm not a great pianist. But Freddie wanted to be a great diva-esque figure, a legend. And being Freddie Mercury allowed Farrokh to be that person.